October 13, 1985. On Friday night, a comedian died in New York. Someone threw him out of a window. When he hit the ground, his head was driven up into his stomach. Nobody cares. Nobody but me. Are they right? Is it futile? Soon there will be war. Millions will burn. Millions will perish in sickness and misery. Why does one death matter against so many? Because there's good and there is evil, and evil must be punished. Even in the face of Armageddon, I shall not compromise in this. In October of 2009, renowned ethicist Bernard Rollins argued in his paper Ethics and Euthanasia that a being's death ultimately defines its welfare. He suggests the following scenario. A man, moments from death, overhears his loving wife of 40 years say to another man, "I can't wait till that old idiot's gone. Then at last we can be together on his money." In that instant, Rollins argues, what he thought was a good life is suddenly transfigured into a nightmare. This program will further deal with the idea of ultimate welfare. In the anonymous epic poem Beowulf, the hero uses his life and fame to gain a protective legacy for his people. Alan Moore's graphic novel Watchmen gives us Rorschach, an anti-hero, who despite his morally blank view of the world, finds something concrete enough to spend his life and death defending. Steve Jobs, in his 2005 commencement address at Stanford University, describes how a near-death experience with cancer affected his view of life. And finally, Eric Bogosian's one-man play, The Glass, illustrates the nightmare of a self-centered life. Dying the good death, a program. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, shudderous ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. The king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard, but scarcely cut through. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it. But in one heart, sorrow rose up. His name was Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, a well-regarded warrior. He waded the dangerous reek and went under arms to his lord, saying only, "Go on, dear Beowulf, I shall stand by you." Then the fire-breathing dragon was mad to attack. When a chance came, he caught the hero and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. Then the noble son of Weohstan saw the king in danger at his side. He lunged. His sword sank into its belly, and the flames grew weaker. The king drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. "But Phaedra, how vir on me!" Thus every man should act, be at hand when needed. They had killed the enemy. Courage quelled its life. Beowulf spoke. "Now is the time when I would have bestowed this honor on my own son. It had been my fortune to have fathered an heir. But for 50 years I ruled this kingdom. I took what came, cared for my keeping, never fomented quarrels, never swore to a lie. Give thanks that I behold this treasure, that I leave my people so well endowed on the day that I die. Now that I've bartered my last breath to own this fortune, it is up to you to look after them. I can hold out no longer." Then the king, in his great heartedness, unclasped the collar of gold from around his neck and gave it to the young thing, telling him to use it and the war shirt and the gilded helmet well. "You are the last of us, the only one left." That was the warrior's last word. Rorschach's journal, November 1st, 1985. This last entry will shortly meld you into only people can trust. If reading this now, whether I'm alive or dead, you will know truth. Appreciate recent support, and hope world survives long enough for this to reach you. But tanks are in East Berlin, and writings on wall. For my own part, regret nothing. Have lived life free from compromise, and step into the shadow now, without complaint.
People will swallow lies easily, provided they're big enough. Teleported to New York, my creature's death will trigger mechanisms within its massive brain. the resultant psychic shockwave killing half the city. And sensitives worldwide will have bad dreams for years to come. No one will doubt that this is a force so dreadful, it must be repelled. All former enmity aside, no one will know. Those involved are all dead, killed by killers who killed each other. But what about us? Will you expose me, undoing the peace millions died for, kill me, risking subsequent investigation? Morally, you're in checkmate.
How can humans make decisions like this? We're damned if we stay quiet, or it's damned if we don't. Okay. Count me in. We say nothing. Joking, of course. Rashak, wait, where are you going? This is too big to be hard-nosed about. We have to compromise.
No, not even in face of Armageddon. Never compromise. People must be told. Evil must be punished.
Rashak, I can't let you do that.
Of course. Must protect new utopia. One more body amongst foundations makes little difference. Well, what are you waiting for? Do it.
Do it!
I'm honored to be with you on this occasion of your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Today I'd like to share 3 stories with you from my life. That's it. No big deal, just 3 stories. My third story is about death. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I went in at 7:30 for a scan and found a tumor on my pancreas. The doctors told me that this was an incurable cancer, that I had 6 months to live. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means that you have everything you thought you had 10 years to tell your kids, you have to tell them in just 6 months. It means to say your goodbyes. I lived all day with that diagnosis. Later that evening, I went in for a biopsy. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when the doctors put the cells under the microscope to view them, they started crying. Because it turns out that that cancer is a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable by surgery. I had that surgery, and I'm fine now. This was the closest I've ever been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. But having lived through it, I can now say this with a little more certainty than when death was just a purely intellectual concept. No one wants to die. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. Death is life's change agent. It clears out the old and brings in the new. Today, you are that new. But gradually, you will become the old and be cleared away. Your time is limited. So don't waste it listening to someone else's ideas. Don't be trapped living in someone else's thinking. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered for making big choices in life. Because in the face of death, almost everything, external expectations, pride, fear of embarrassment and failure, these things just fall away, leaving only what's truly important. Thank you. It can be a beautiful day like today. I can step out into that day and I can think to myself, this is good. But even if the birds are singing and the sun is shining and the sky is blue, and I'm holding my 4-year-old's hand and everything is perfect, it isn't. Because somewhere, somebody is suffering like you would not believe. I mean, right now, as I say these words, somewhere in Africa, there's a vast sea of human beings slowly starving to death. A sea of human skeletons dying. They're standing under the same sun, the same sky. They're holding their children's hands, too. What can they be thinking as they look down at their kid's bony head and ribby rib cage and bulging belly, big brown eyes, full of death flies. What can they possibly be thinking? It all gets so confusing and depressing. When I get confused and depressed, what I do, I go to the supermarket. I don't know, something about the supermarket just makes me feel better. The environment is so neat and clean, air-conditioned. The name says it all, supermarket. It's like where Superman goes to shop. And that's the way I feel as I push my cart around, my cape flying out behind me, grabbing that bottled water from a melted glacier, those mesquite charcoal chips, blue Jamaican coffee beans from some blue Jamaican. I mean, I love to help them. I give money to every charity, I wear my red ribbon, I lick stamps for the benefit committee. I've got the t-shirts and the coffee mugs and the tote bags to prove it. I know that I care, and I know that I am concerned. My glass isn't just half full, it's overflowing. Because that glass is the glass of life, and it is filled with love. And I am drinking with relish from my glass of life. And those precious nutrients are going down my throat, into my body, and they fill my soul. And I drink. And I drink. And after a while, I drink so much, my bladder gets kind of full. And I have to pee. And I pee love. Look, 100 years from now, I'll just be some bones in a box. And so will you. And so what I've done in this puny little life of mine will not have made much difference. But I'll tell you one thing. While I was here, I lived and I loved. And I was concerned. And that's important.